And now the biggest question of all, you're an atheist music group. Now, what does that mean? How is your music different than other alternative rock? Is it just lyrics?
Well,
Or is it a source of inspiration? Do you look to Satan? Do you eat babies before you practice?
Not anymore.
Or is there always a bowl of spaghetti right next to you?
I don't know that I necessarily like the idea of being an atheist band per se. It definitely shapes what we do, but to me that type of label almost gets into the idea that we're trying to sing about a certain thing or sing to a certain group of people, and that's not the case. For me personally, and that's, we all contribute to the stuff that we do lyrically, so they'd have to speak to their own, views on what they're bringing to the table. But for me personally, it's about all types of systems that try to take away from the individual, whether it is religion or it's government or it's, even within families and communities. You sometimes see this idea that trying to get people to conform to a certain idea or a certain way of doing things because so-and-so said so, or this says so, or that says so. And for me, the individual trumps. I think that's the beauty in life, is each of us pursuing it in the way that is fitting to ourselves, to what it is in life that we want to accomplish at that point in time. So for me, everything kind of intertwines. I think they're all part of the same. I think they're all symptoms of the same disease. So I don't think it's just an atheist matter. I think there's tribalism and statism that also fits into the same paradigm. So to me, it covers a little more than just the belief in a God side of it.
That's definitely a good point, and that's not something that I've had guests speak about before on the show. And usually, what I do is I ask people, how they became an atheist, and everybody's born an atheist, but at some point that becomes the other way around. And it seems like you guys come at it from a slightly different perspective than I've heard before. And when I ask most people, how did you become an atheist? They'll say, well, I was this for a while, and my parents were this, and I was raised this way, and then it just, one day I read a book, and boom. But it seems like, Richard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm getting the sense that maybe you saw all these different things going on, and atheism was kind of an end result, or a conclusion.
Yeah,
of all these different factors. So why don't you give us a little bit of your own personal history?
It's been a long process. And I could probably spend 2 hours doing it, and we don't have that kind of time. But anyway, I grew up from the time I was 4 or 5 I grew in a very religious home, very fundamentalist, very legalistic, and
Christian.
Yes, it was Christian. It was a brand of Pentecostalism.
The ones that don't believe in dinosaurs.
Handle snakes?
No, we never handled snakes. I had to wait till later in life to handle a snake. But it was growing up with a lot of fear. And, I remember one particular time when I must have been in high school. I came home from school, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my mom and dad made huge sacrifices because they felt that was important, and so I always knew that Mom was going to be home. And that particular day, I got home, and Mom wasn't there, and my younger brother wasn't there, and it freaked me out. I was like, oh my, the rapture has taken place, and I've been left behind, and it was terrifying to me, and that was the type of fear that I grew up with. That you're always afraid that you're doing something wrong, and my vision of God was this big bully who sat up in the sky and had a huge hammer and was going to squash you like an ant every time you did something wrong. And I finally reached a point where I made the decision or made the determination that God was worse off than I was, so I didn't want to serve him. So I spent a time away from church, but I wasn't an atheist because I still believed in God. I just thought he was horrible and was angry. And so that went on for a while, and then, personally, I really started degrading in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying it's from the religion or anything like that. I'm just part of the journey for me. And at some point, I had met some Christians. It was actually through Amway. One cult leading to another. There, I just upset two groups of people all at once. But the reality is they were great people, and they really cared about me as an individual. And so I started getting involved with them in a lot of their personal activities, which included church. And the church was a softer, gentler type of church. And I started considering the possibility I might have been wrong, that maybe it was just that particular brand of religion. So I became somewhat of a Baptist at that point. And, spent some time as a Baptist and had some great experiences. I think me getting a little bit older and changing some perspective, but I still had a lot of issues. But I ended up switching from going to a Baptist church to a non-denominational charismatic church. And
so what does that mean? Non-denominational charismatic?
Yes. They didn't make any claim to any type of denomination, even though most people would probably consider them Pentecostal. Charismatic is more describing their style of worship and interaction with, in their church services. There was, speaking in tongues and laying on of hands. And
did they wear flair?
Falling out. And earlier versions of that church did, yes. So it was all of that super spiritual type of thing, and prophetic words, and there was a part of me that really desired to have that supernatural connection. This and my motivation for it at this point in time, I was going through a huge metamorphosis and really changing who I was, and I really wanted to become a force for good at that point in time. And I really got intrigued by some of this because I thought, well, if God can speak through you and kind of point out to you, when you're walking down the street, this was the idea that was kind of presented. You could walk down the street and you could see a stranger and know what was bothering them and go up and have an impact on their life. And I thought, man, this is really great. This is something I would love to be able to do. And unfortunately, as I dug into it deeper, I found out that, really it was just, to me, felt like a lot of parlor tricks. And then the hardest part for me was I actually read through the entire Bible.
Uh-oh.
And I had already had some issues with the idea, with the idea of eternal torment, because it just doesn't seem, I don't know, it doesn't seem like something a good father would do. I was a pretty crappy father at times in the past. And I never went to the extreme.
You never went to full eternal torment?
No, I never, and I never had a desire to. The things that I did that were horrible was more out of ignorance of my own problems and issues that I had in my life. It wasn't because I had this, well, you don't want to claim me as your father? Well, fine, I'm going to torment you forever. That never crossed my mind. And then you see examples of these parents who something goes wrong in their mind and they think it's okay to lock up their 9-year-old daughter in a closet for weeks as a form of punishment, which just happened a few years ago. And we all know that's wrong. But why is it okay for God to do that when he's supposed to be morally superior to me? And of course, then as I get reading through the Bible and you find all these things that, God's telling you to go, kill these tribes of people and take their women as trophies, and it's like, this is pretty horrible stuff, and I was having a hard time resolving it, and it led me to trying to understand how the Bible was put together, which led me down this rabbit hole of, wow, this is really kind of a mess. And so I finally, slowly, I mean, this is a process over a couple of years of this last part, kind of let the Christianity thing go and kind of fell back to what was kind of my default state of being a deist. And I was pretty content with being a deist.
Oh, the worst kind of content.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's a button of mine.
Well, I think for me though, I needed a mental break. I needed, going through all that process. I don't know that I was ready to step on forward. Right. And I was still at a point there that, I didn't know what I believed about, evolution, and Richard Dawkins was still kind of the devil to me. But, it finally, just as I thought about it more, it's like, this is pretty improbable that there's some type of creative force, little things like our wonderful design of having the same tube to provide our food and our air. I mean, come on, that's not good design. So you've got either an incompetent designer or no designer.
Or he was drunk.
Right, you just got the wrong god. It's the old Greek god Bacchus or whatever.
Yeah, so
he was drunk.
So it finally led me to the point that it's like I won't dismiss that there's some idea that there could possibly be a creative force, but I just think it's so improbable.
Yeah, I think you said that the best way possible.
I don't have any reason to believe that there is. So at that point, I mean, there's no gods or God type things for me to believe in. So that makes me an atheist.
Hey, yeah, that's a good story. I'm just not to trivialize your journey. Yeah, and I've been trying to ask atheists, try to get this kind of story out of them, and usually you get a really short, 3-sentence summary. I appreciate you going into that kind of detail. I think it's important and interesting to be able to speak like that and put words to everything that happened. I do it with myself, and I think it's interesting hearing people's what they were thinking, because it's really a kind of a thought process, a really long one.
Right. And painful.
And painful. It's a lot of change.
When you that deeply believe in something, to have that ripped away is a loss that is on the level of the death of somebody that you love deeply, and it's not easy. So.
Right.